Hello, Miranda.
Hi, Sam.
Nice to meet you in
nice
picture. That's great.
It's nice to meet you too.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. This is good of you.
It's a pleasure. It's my absolute pleasure.
Hello, Julia.
Hi, Sam.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Julia.
Hi,
Yeah,
Hi Julia. I'm Miranda.
lovely to see you. So we've got 60 women registered for it, and we'll record the session because there's some who want the recording instead.
Yep.
Well, as you both know, this is a big issue for Australian women who often leave that family building a bit too late and need to come to terms with donor stuff. So Julia, you're going to start and do sort of 15 minutes on come to terms with this stuff.
Yep.
And I'll do 20 minutes on sort of options globally, and then Miranda will do 20 or 15 minutes on optimizing your health stuff. And then we'll do the parent panel of women who've done all this stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah, just so I know, do you both deal with patients who are doing local or overseas sort of arrangements? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as you both know, we've got a dire shortage of donors locally here in Australia, so many women have to go offshore as a result.
Especially now with Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll be talking in my session about that kind of thing.
Awesome.
About what the options are now. We used to have a number of donors who flew in here for donation, and that doesn't happen much anymore.
Was that with travelling donors?
Yes, it partly was. Travelling donors was doing a lot of that. Yeah. And that's now got all a bit complicated. I mean, I think it'll come back a bit, but it's still very low. So the main route now is frozen eggs coming in, rather than people.
So Sam, do you sort of recommend World Egg Bank? Is that what your recommendation is? Yeah, no, because
I mean, they're so expensive.
They're expensive, and their success rate hasn't been particularly fabulous either.
No, exactly. And I feel bad for that. So I'll be talking a bit about that stuff,
awesome.
About the costs for World Egg Bank and the costs of other providers in Australia who are a
awesome.
lot less, just to give people information, because it is a bit of a rort what you're paying there. And it's a lot of money if it doesn't work out. Anyway, so that's part of my session to go through those bits and pieces, because as you're probably aware, a lot of the IVF clinics have done a deal with World Egg Bank, and for some of them, that's all they offer. Yeah.
Sam,
anyway,
can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You weren't able to hear me when I had those on, were you?
Oh no, I could.
Are we? Okay. So I just want to ask, so you basically do the soup to nuts, right? So you sort of bring the whole world together.
Yeah.
Soup
That's
to
right.
nuts.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. I mean, I'll do it in the intro. We still specialise in cross-border stuff where people have to go outside their own state or country to do this.
Beautiful.
Hello, Simone.
Hello.
Nice
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Nice to
Hi,
meet
Simone.
Hello.
We're going to go live in a second, so I'll get Miranda and Simone to hide your screen things.
How do I do that?
You go
Down the bottom.
Down the bottom and go stop video.
You got it.
Yeah, stop video.
Stop video.
And mute.
And then you can just mute
And
yourself. What I'll do is I will
And I might pop these on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm going to start letting people in.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's fine.
Yep. Cool.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sam Everingham from Growing Families. For those of you who haven't been to a Growing Families webinar or event before, we're an education provider who really supports intending parents who are having to navigate family building across borders, whether that's egg donors or surrogates or all kinds of different permutations. I'm a dad by egg donation and surrogacy, and tonight we're running this webinar really focusing on egg donor issues. There'll be the chance for you to ask questions. There's a Q&A tab down the bottom where you can ask questions, if you like, of speakers, if we have time for them. If not, then I'm sure that you can email them later on with other questions you might have. We'll record the sessions as well so that you can access them later if you miss bits of it, and we'll send you out a link to the recording tomorrow. We're going to start by hearing from Julie McDougall, who's a mental health therapist by training, and her career has been an interesting one. She's taken her from actress to marriage therapist to counsellor, which is fascinating. She's got an MA in clinical psychology. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and been in private practice since 2003, specialising in fertility support and the decision to use donor eggs and its impact on your family and on couples and so forth. So she understands this journey from the inside out, particularly because she's experienced 8 miscarriages herself, 2 of them late term, 5 rounds of unsuccessful IVF. But there was a rosy side to her story because when she was 42, her sister donated her eggs. And after the first transfer, she was pregnant. So Julia, thank you so much for coming along and sharing with us.
You're welcome, Sam. You're so welcome.
I'll hand over to you.
Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here tonight because I'm going to talk about one of my most favourite topics is how to have a baby when you've been told you can't. And I have hit so many brick walls and had to let go of so much to actually now be the parent of the most beautiful daughter who's a 13-year-old. So I just want to firstly just sort of support the incredible difficulty and journey that this process takes you on. And I'm going to speak in and out of my own sort of personal experience and my own sort of therapeutic client experience as well. That can bring up so much mental health issues, so much anxiety, so much depression, so much fear that I'm never going to be able to achieve my goals. But it takes a tremendous amount of resilience and bravery. But I would have to say that myself and the women that embark on this journey have this profound determination of knowing that they want to have a baby and they will not be denied. And it's not a knowing that is an intellectual knowing, it's a full body knowing. Because if you are going to embark on the donor egg journey, you have to let go of so much of your dream, so much of the story you've created, so much of the whole sort of dream that's so detailed in your head and what the baby will look like and all of that. You've got to let go into the unknown and potentially have the DNA inside you of someone you don't know, or potentially a family member. I use the donor egg, the egg of my sister, which is what Sam said. It took a lot for me to get to the journey. As I was 42 by the time I had done all my egg cycles, and I had been bargaining with the Great Spirit and with my fertility doctor. Surely I can be the one who has the lowest AMH, the egg, the ovary reserve count. I had it so low. He said, "You will not be able to have your own baby." And I said, "I am determined I will." And he took my hands and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your money anymore. It's not going to happen." And I was like a train had hit me and I was just broken and shattered. So my sister then called me up and she said, "Come on, let's sync up our cycles and I'm going to donate you some eggs." And I said, "No, I'm done. There was so much depression and so much exhaustion from the process. But something in me drew this incredible, okay, I'm just going to take one step at a time and I'm just going to go ahead with this." And ironically, with this journey with my sister, I had no attachment to the outcome. I'd been through so much and I was just let God, and I walked through it. So So I had, even though I was an incredible tomboy, I had this dream of having this baby, and I practiced with the doll until I was 13 years old. And when I actually finally achieved my dream, and this beautiful baby that I was holding in my arms, that was from the donor egg of my sister, and I got pregnant straight away. And the reason, just want to clarify, the reason I had 8 miscarriages was because I had a uterine septum, where my uterus was shaped like a heart, and I had to have an operation to open it up. So the babies would grow to 6.5 months, and then the blood flow would be cut off, and then I'd give birth. So harrowing, but I'm here to tell you, I look back on all of that now and just have this beautiful river of just kind of forgetfulness. I just have that it was all meant to be, and that it's all fallen into place. What do I just want to say is, there's so many developmental steps that you go through in choosing to be, choosing donor egg. Like I said, firstly, letting go of the dream. Then there's this incredible hope, okay, maybe I can actually step into the unknown and take that journey. And then you begin on the same, the incredible wheel of IVF. Will it work? Am I investing all this money? And then all of these myriad of questions come up. Will I love this baby? Will this baby fit into my family? Will it look like me? Will people think it's my baby? Will my partner love this baby and love me? Because maybe it's my partner's sperm, but it's not my egg. And there's just a myriad of questions. And I know, I'm going to be very vulnerable here, I know that I had this question about, will my baby be cute? Because as much as I love my sister, she's very serious. And I was like, oh, am I going to actually have all my sister's traits? And she does, but in the most beautiful way. And she is my incredible teacher. And so all of the things that come with my daughter Soleil are actually the perfect thing for our family, for our union. As you work through, and as I work through with clients, their little let goes and then their little openings, it takes quite a long period of time to actually come to terms with, I'm open to donor egg. I'm actually open to taking any. People choose not to because of stepping into the unknown. So a lot of my work is being able to tolerate the discomfort, being able to let go of the shore and sail into your boat and go off into the lake, and you don't know where you're going. And it can be terrifying because a lot of us are very committed to being in control, and particularly in this process that has to do with our body. And we're letting go of the thing that's the closest to us, which is having a child from my own DNA that I know that I can trust, and letting go into that unknown can actually bring up a lot of anxiety. So it can be so important and fabulous if you find a great fertility specialist, great therapist that you love, that can help you transition and know that all these stages are really normal and really natural, and that you don't stop at any one of these stations. You just keep moving through them, letting the feelings move through you, and keep moving into the unknown, and slowly become way more practiced in living in that unknown. And then you've got the big unknown. You've got that beautiful baby in your belly, and you know nothing about her because he or she is not your DNA. Then that's another whole stage of letting go into the unknown. I want to just talk about the commitment to our DNA. And my clients and myself, what I have found is that the connection to the child is actually a spiritual thing. And we have this incredible opportunity of bringing Western medicine and all the advancements of that, and with that spiritual trust, and those two things come together, and that you bring the baby, that baby is the right child for you. And I'm not drawing an analogy between baby and pets, but I know that I've heard people say that their pets come, make a contract with them in the past life, and they bring it through to them in this life, and the right pet finds you. And I have found with myself and my client, that right child finds you. And I think probably there's just so much that I'd like to say, but I just really want to emphasize that it's a journey that takes time and a trillion feelings and a trillion little steps along the way that get you to your dream. And if you are that determined and you have that courage in your heart and that fiery spirit of, I will not deny this is actually my calling, then you can make it through all those little stages, and people hold your hands along the way. And I just have a client who just had her second baby at 50. And I have a friend who had just had her second donor egg baby at 52. And they are so, so happy and so blessed. And they've all had their most incredible journey. And these women are a bit like that lioness on my wall there, that have really been through so much. And now settling into parenthood, they have this profound wisdom and maturity. And this it's very hard to describe. You kind of have this relaxation after you've been through that journey, and you have this surrender, and it makes parenting so much easier. And the last thing I'd say is, everybody I know, including myself and all my clients, when you hold that baby in your arms and you look into their beautiful eyes and you see the shape of their face and their beautiful body, and all of a sudden this journey all makes sense. Somehow you go, that's what I needed to learn, and that's what I needed to go through. And this child is perfect for me and my family.
Julia, thank you so much. It's great to have someone like you who understands this journey so well, and who's been on it, who knows the emotions that many women go through in this area. And I mean, you and I both deal with these all the time. Just one question I wanted to pose to you before we move on is, when women have been through a number of failed, perhaps IVF attempts, and they're dealing with that grief, is there a need to deal with the grief before they move on to donor?
Look, I think often time is really of the essence with age. So yes, ideally, but I think they can run concurrently. And there are a couple of sort of things I suggest with women that I work with, that you really concretize the grief. So if you've had a failed attempt or you've had a miscarriage, that you actually mark it in, like you have an altar, or you give that child a name, the potential child a name, you write them a poem, and that you can have, what seems to be incredibly helpful is you have a glass of salt water, and that salt water represents your tears and your grief. So if you're focusing on then going into donor egg, but you can go, okay, I'm putting my grief there, and you're parking it. And somehow these sort of complicated processes of grieving and hope can go together. But ideally, it's nice to grieve and have that complete. But it's not an ideal world, and we can hold multiple things.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. All right, look, we're going to move on now. And I know Julia will be staying on the line if you've got some questions for her, put them in the chat. But I'm going to now talk a bit about donor options. This is focusing particularly on Australians, but I'm aware that there may be some of you who are coming in from other countries. I'm going to share a bit of a screen with you here now, and what we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes is considerations in looking at donors. Using friends and family as donors, like Julia did in her case. If that's not an option, then altruistic donor forums, clinic source donors, and overseas donors. So first of all, known donors is what we define sort of friends and family as, or people you might have met, online. Identity release donors are those where they're agreeing to share details with your child, you at 16 or 18 years, and anonymous donors where there's no name or contact details shared. Though remember, even with those kinds of donors these days, the widespread use of DNA testing means anonymity can't be guaranteed for those donors. So then there's donor rules. If you're undertaking your IVF in Australia, the donor must be known or ID released. They must be altruistic, have access to counselling, and adhere to donor limits in terms of how many families they donate to. And they vary by state, but they're between 5 and 10 families. In New South Wales, for example, it's no more than 5, including their own. In Queensland, it's 10 families, for example. Also remember that success rates when you're using donor eggs depend largely on the age of the donor. Just statistically, I mean, eggs do decline in quality, as many of you know, after the age of 35. So, you know, the live birth rates for eggs from a 30-year-old are going to be 30-40% per transfer, dwindling down to 3 to 5% on average with eggs from a 42-year-old. So, I mean, many of the patients we deal with, you know, are coming to IVF at a later age, and it's hard. It's a really hard journey emotionally and financially at that age, and statistically, as you can see. The other thing is the live birth rates do differ based on how many days the embryos were grown to before they were frozen. You know, there's a higher live birth rate for clinics in Australia that use day 5 embryos versus those that use day 3 embryos, for example. Julie's talked about, you know, her sister is a donor, and we're going to have it on the panel a bit later on, hear from another mum whose sister carried for her. We'll look at that in the detail soon. Clinic recruited donors in the Australian context is hard because of our laws here in Australia around no payment and so forth. It's very hard for us to recruit donors because there's a lot of sort of appointments involved. There's counselling involved, and a lot of follow-up and paperwork, and medical invasion of your body. So, you know, obviously for a good friend or family member, that's something they do out of love. But for other people, it is a much harder ask, and we struggle in that area. So clinics in Australia don't tend to have many local donors on their lists, and if they do, the wait times for those, you know, can often be up to a year or more. Forums is another way to go, where you go online to a forum like Egg Donation Australia, and you put your story out there, and you hope that donors might come forward and talk to you. And there are, funnily enough, a lot of Australian women who are happy to be donors. There are on the EDA forum and have donated multiple times to different families. The main complaint we get about these forums is that they're hard to use because there's no sort of pictures of the donors or details. You've got to sort of interact one-on-one with the donors when they contact you, and, you know, maybe go offline and ask them some of the awkward questions about their lives and their, you know, statistics and that kind of thing. And the other thing we do find here in Australia is many of the women who are donors on those forums are women who've had their own children already, and they know the value of a family, and so they're often sort of 32, 35 or a bit or older. So the success rates aren't as high as what you'd see in countries where the donors are a lot younger. So the pros of these forums is obviously their availability. Some of them, you know, well, not for eggs, but for sperm will do home insemination. They may sort of have donated lots of times before, and that can be above donor limits. That can be hard. The other issue, obviously, is using overseas donors, and we're going to talk a bit about that now. It's popular really because there's a far greater number overseas. They can be compensated. They are more expensive to access, so there's more paperwork, and there's less contact with the donor, of course. Different countries have different rules about donor anonymity, and we are seeing a much greater trend here in Australia for family couples, singles, to want a known ID release donor for their child's sake, and only some countries like Ukraine and Georgia sort of have those kinds of donors, and the USA, of course, too. Lots of people ask me, oh, is it better to have, use fresh eggs or frozen eggs? And lots of women sort of assume that fresh eggs are better. And it does differ a bit by country. Funnily enough, in the Australian context, the success rates for frozen eggs are actually higher than they are for fresh. It's a little bit different in the USA, but certainly, the frozen egg live birth rates are still very, very high, and the data seems to show that for frozen eggs, they're just as good, if not better, than using fresh. This chart just reminds you that in the USA, for example, nearly all of their donors are under 30 years of age, whereas here in Australia, most of our donors are 30 years or above, 75% of them, just because they tend to be, similar age to the women who need those eggs in Australia. So there are, well, you can sort of travel overseas for donor IVF, and the common places that Australians go are the USA and Greece, Cyprus, in particular, and Spain, Georgia, and South Africa. Your partner can either ship their sperm or you travel to provide sperm to those kinds of places. If you're traveling, the advantage is, you could transfer fresh eggs over there. Some people like that, but on the downside, that transfer might not be successful. The success rates per transfer aren't that high, even with donor eggs. And the issue then becomes, can you stay on for a second transfer, or are you going to come back again? Because the issue is, when you're using an overseas egg donor, those embryos can't be brought back here to Australia. So you've got to travel over every time you need a donor. The costs of those kinds of programs differ quite a lot. In the USA, where there's a huge choice of donors and the IVF success rates are very good, the costs are also very high, 34,000 US often. Whereas places like Greece and Cyprus and Georgia become much more popular because the costs are a lot lower for this kind of thing. What's increasingly common now is for Australian clinics and New Zealand clinics to have, to have deals with overseas egg banks where they bring frozen eggs into Australia. Because the advantage of that obviously being, once the embryos are made, you've got them here, so you haven't got to keep traveling. The donors, the eggs that are coming in, have to meet those same requirements in terms of they've got to be altruistic and have counselling done, and adhere to donor limits. So there's a smaller number who are available to come in. The advantage obviously is you can stay with your Australian doctor. The downside, and you can have a second or third transfers easily. The downside are they're not guaranteeing a pregnancy, let alone a live birth. The costs are a bit high, and limited clinics in Australia offer these frozen egg programs. One of the big ones is the World Egg Bank. But again, they don't have a lot of donors that meet Australian requirements, and their programs are expensive. We'll come to that in a minute. You can see, though, that they have lots of pictures online of the donors you can look at. They're often not all available, so you've got to have sort of backups in your mind with these things. And they sort of, World Egg Bank is an example of a program. A lot of the big clinics in Australia have deals with them, and the cheapest program, and this is all in Australian dollars, is including your IVF transfer sort of here is of 22 to 24,000, and that's sort of 6 eggs which are left over from other bundles without guarantees. Then they have a sort of a guarantee of 1 day 3 embryo for that sort of money there, and then a custom choice with, I'll guarantee 2 day 5 embryos, but only if you ship your sperm to the USA and the embryos are shipped back. And again, that's sort of a lot of money, 33 to 35,000 Australian, for that kind of program. But look, a lot of the big clinics do have a deal with World Egg Bank in the USA for this. Then there's programs in Eastern Europe. Central IVF has been a long time provider, and despite the Ukraine war, they are still providing eggs into Australia, frozen eggs into Australia. For example, that 10 egg program there, guaranteeing 4 of those is that 18,000-ish, and 8 eggs about 15. And then there are other ones. Egg Donors Asia specialises in Asian donors. They don't have a lot that meet Australian requirements, about 10 at a time. But they'll guarantee, 2 day 5 embryos or 1 day 5 embryo. Overgene Bank will guarantee sort of 8 eggs and has deals with 1 or 2 clinics here in Sydney. And Menor Medical is a bit of a newer provider here, but will guarantee you 8, 10 or 14 eggs up to sort of 4 day 5 embryos at those prices on the left there. And those prices include shipping the eggs over here as well. So all you've got to pay for after that is your IVF costs. So people often ask us which clinics offer these overseas donor eggs, and there's not a lot that do. As I said, the big clinics offer World Egg Bank. Monash, apart from Victoria, Monash in other states is also now offering the Ukrainian Georgian donors from Menor Medical at that sort of much more affordable price point. And a lot of the smaller clinics have done deals with these more affordable providers. So Repromed in South Australia offers the Manor and the Central programs. Family Fertility in South Australia offers one. Demeter over at Liverpool in Sydney offers a few. And Fertility First, Dr. Anne Clark, offers the Asian program and the Central one from Ukraine as well. And there's a few. There's an ACT one, and Lynn Burmeister is the only Victorian provider, funnily enough, to offer an overseas program from Ukraine. Pivot in WA's got one, and Coastal in Queensland. So not a lot of clinics tend to have these tie-ups. So you've got to sort of know where to go if you want to look at these kinds of options. So look, I hope that's a useful overview of what's there. I can see a few questions come up on the tab. Someone's just reminded me that Greece has just changed their laws to allow pregnancy release at 18. So that's great to know, because up till now, Greece has only had anonymous donors, and so they won't even provide you pictures of your donor. And what you've got to do in the Greece context is send a picture of yourself over, and they'll match based on the picture of you that you send. Someone's asked me on that point about not being able to ship embryos back from overseas. That's the question is it only for an anonymous donor? And that's correct. If your donor meets Australian requirements, that is, she's altruistic, ID release, and had counselling, then you can ship those embryos back to Australia. We've had cases where that's been done from Georgia, for example, from Ukraine, and from the USA and Canada, where the donors have been used, and we can ship back because they've met those requirements. But you need to sort of organise that up front, and we can help with that if required. Growing Families has an arm that does sort of shipping of sperm and embryos around the world. So some of you know about that already, but we've certainly had a lot of people use that in recent years. To be honest, though, we tend to find it's much easier if you travel there yourself these days. Now that COVID sort of got out of the picture to some degree. So I hope that's helpful. We're going to go to the next presentation now. There are a few more detailed presentations coming up in September. For those of you who want more information about particular countries, look on our website for those details for webinars in September. They're actually focused particularly on the European and UK markets, but there'll be recordings available as well, so you can access those too. All right. I'm now going to introduce you to Miranda Miles, who, hi Miranda, thanks for coming on here. So Miranda's a
Hi,
naturopath,
Sam.
she's an acupuncturist. She's focused on health and hormones, fertility and family. She created a podcast, the Fertile Project, and the Donor Project, I think too.
Donor Project. Yeah.
Okay. So she's also had experience of egg donation herself overseas, haven't you, Miranda, I think?
Yes, I have.
So
I have
it'd be
used.
great for you to share a bit about that.
I will.
But thank you for coming on. I mean, obviously, we want you to talk a bit about sort of, preparing yourself for this journey and, being in the best place you can be health-wise. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so thanks a heap.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this opportunity. My story is a really interesting mixed bag. I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility when I was around 40, and I hate that as a diagnosis. I had been through 3 rounds of IVF using my own eggs and was only getting 2 or 3 eggs at a time. And that was very, very unsuccessful. And then I heard about using donor eggs. So my journey was that I went overseas, and in a snapshot, it took 8 years for me to create my family. It took me 9 rounds of IVF, 3 using my own eggs and 6 using donor eggs. And I'll circle back to that in a moment. It took 13 embryos, 3 trips to Thailand, 4 trips to Malaysia, a bazillion drugs, a gazillion dollars. And I finally have my 2 beautiful children who are now 8 and 4, about to turn 4. But the other really interesting part of my journey is I used 3 different egg donors. So the first one was a South African donor that came to Thailand. So it was an anonymous process, but we happened to be staying in the same hotel as my donor, believe it or not. So we did actually get to meet her. So she came from South Africa, we came from Australia to meet in Thailand, in Bangkok. And the first time we put 2 embryos in, I was 41 and we had a successful pregnancy and a successful live birth, thus Charlie. We had 3 other embryos from that donor. We used all of those, so another 2 rounds and nothing happened. We then we moved the operation or the group that I was using, which actually, Sam, was Fertility Choices that are now Donor Eggs Malaysia. Yep. So I used Fertility Choices they moved their operation to Malaysia, and we chose a second donor, and we only got 3 eggs, which was devastating. And that was simply because the donor was human. She had a bad cycle. She didn't respond to the drugs. And that unfortunately was not great for us. So we wound up with only the 3 eggs fertilized, but again, none of them worked. We had no success with that as well. So then we chose our third donor, and that we were given all 15 eggs that she produced because of the disappointing cycle with the second donor. So we wound up with 15 eggs, 9 embryos, put 2 in, and wound up with wound up with my daughter Matilda. When we put the 2 embryos in, I think I actually was pregnant with twins. My HCG was very, very high. At 5 weeks, I had a bleed. And it was a really funny thing. When I was pregnant with Matilda, and we think with the twins, Charlie, who was at the time 4, kept saying to me, "Mummy, mummy, mummy." He actually calls me Minda. There's 2 babies in there. There's 2 babies in there. And he had no idea that we'd put 2 embryos in. Then when I had the bleed, I went straight round to my obstetrician, and he had a look, and we only had 1 embryo in there. And I went home, and that was great. Still had my beautiful baby, so that was fine. Went home that night, and Charlie had absolutely no idea what had happened. But he said to me, "Minda, there's only 1 baby in there now." So with this amazing energetic connection of my beautiful donor conceived child, which was Charlie, connecting with my other donor conceived child, which was a different egg donor. And to me, that just showed the absolute importance of blood. You know, they may not be your DNA, but they're absolutely your blood and absolutely your spirit, your energy, your vitality, everything. An egg only doesn't make a baby, right? An egg is just one tiny little cell. You are still so important in the process of creating that child. So that was really, really important for me. The other thing I really wanted to emphasize, though, was so my donors, the first one was 23, the second one was 25, and the third one was 29. And the point I really, really want to make is that just because you're using, a beautiful, gorgeous, young egg doesn't guarantee success. Like any IVF process, it still generally takes 3 full rounds of IVF or donor egg IVF to actually get your live birth. And that's where it's really, really important to prepare yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, mentally, as Julia had said, and just really making sure that you are ready for this process, because there is absolutely no guarantees here. I think because it's not our DNA, then if you're doing this as a couple, your partner's sperm becomes your genetic connection with your child, almost. His genetic connection becomes even more important. And what we're trying to do is trying to create a super embryo. We're not trying to create a super egg. The gorgeous 20-something-year-old egg is only half of the picture. You still need a super embryo, so that sperm health and the quality of the sperm is incredibly important and something that is often overlooked. If you are here in this process, I'm imagining you've probably been through 1,000 rounds of IVF already. You've already been through incredible heartache. And most of the time, the sperm is not really looked at properly. So that is one thing that the couples that work with me, we go into the sperm very, very detailed and look at making sure the morphology, the motility, the DNA fragmentation, all of those parameters are really, really super healthy. And if they're not, then we take 3 months to actually prepare the male and the sperm for that process as well. And it's high dose nutrition, changing their diet, their lifestyle, to the point where we even get them to ice their balls because sperm don't like heat. So we want to keep them cool, and that helps with the morphology and that DNA fragmentation. And then we're creating this beautiful super embryo. Sam, as you pointed out, that it's not necessarily a high success rate, and we want to get that success rate as good as we can. And we don't want couples going through this and then suffering early pregnancy loss. We have all been through so much. We don't need an early pregnancy loss. And not always, but often those early pregnancy losses are to do with the sperm, not actually the egg. And we tend to forget that. The men kind of can get a little bit forgotten in this process sometimes. So I think really looking after the health of the sperm, it takes 74 days to create a beautiful sperm. So that 3 months of preconception care is incredibly important to try and boost those success rates a little bit.
Yeah. Miranda, someone's asked a question about, did PGD test the embryos from each donor when you did it?
So I didn't. And the reason I didn't was because we were using quite young donors, and that PG testing or PGD testing tends to come in a little bit later. Plus, this was when I had Charlie. That was 9 years ago. It kind of wasn't a thing. You didn't kind of do that. You're using a young egg, so let's just go. But I do wonder with the 3 embryos from my first donor that had absolutely no outcome, what was going on there. And of course, we can't, because it was an anonymous process, then we can't change the health of the egg. So, you know, when I'm working with my women who are using their own eggs, we're going through a process of egg quality, implantation, transfer, sperm quality, and successful pregnancy. Whereas what we're doing now, obviously, is not needing to focus on that egg quality if we don't know the donor. If we do, fantastic. If we can get them involved, absolutely brilliant. But generally, when I'm working with the intending mums or the intending parents, we focus on that implantation and the blood flow to the uterus, making sure the endometrial lining is, you know, a good thickness, making sure that there's really good blood flow to the uterus, because that's what helps with that implantation. Implantation's an interesting thing. It's not just a single point in time. It's not like, okay, we do the transfer and, you know, 7-8 days later, bam, it's implanted. Implantation happens over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And we need really good blood flow for all of that time. And nutrition is incredibly important for that. So we look at things like high dose coenzyme Q10, high dose, and coenzyme Q10 is great for egg quality as well. That's how people tend to know it. But the way I use it from a donor egg IVF is for that endometrial lining, and the mitochondrial support for the embryo to keep developing. Because remember, you may get a beautiful embryo, but we need it to keep dividing. We need that cellular division so that the embryo keeps growing, yeah? And the main nutrients for that is for the mitochondria. So coenzyme Q10, B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, magnesium, iron, copper, and manganese, lipoic acid, right? So we need all of that mitochondrial energy to keep that embryo dividing and developing and implanting. Yeah, and that's where the nutrition just is. I don't think I mean, I've been a naturopath for a long time. I've taught nutritional medicine for a long time and the biochemistry of nutrition for a long time. But even I kind of went, oh, it's a 23-year-old egg. We'll be right, mate. No, the last 3 embryos did nothing, you know. So I've learned a lot in all of that time of the importance of that. And we all have the importance of that blood flow that brings nutrients to the endometrium, that brings nutrients, to help support that pregnancy.
And if the endometrial lining hasn't thickened up appropriately, can the IVF detect that and delay the transfer till the next month?
Well, they can, and they should be doing that. Yeah, right. But women can do. You can do like a dummy cycle. So go on the pill for X amount of, you know, for about a cycle, and then go through a dummy cycle to see if the endometrial lining is thickening at the right time. We want it to be most clinics won't transfer if your lining's less than 6 mil, but we really want it to be pushing more towards 7, 8, 9. Okay. And that gives this beautiful, really flexible endometrial lining. Once it starts to get to 13, 14, 15, it's too stiff. Right. Like it starts to get too stiff. So you don't want it to be really thick either. It's that 7, 8, 9 mil is just, it's perfect. That's what we want. So you can do a dummy cycle to see if that's what's happening, which is a great thing to do as well.
Yeah. Just one more question for you. Are you a fan of medicated cycles or not?
So, you know what's really funny? I jump on some of these forums and go, oh my God, there's so many drugs these people are taking. It's for me. So I did every time I did, every one of my successful pregnancies was a fresh transfer. So we did do medicated in terms of being on the pill to sync our cycles, right? But apart from that, I had some Progonova, I had Orgalutran, and that was about it. And some quinone pessaries, right, to support progesterone levels. So yes, I'm a fan of using medication, because whatever it takes at the end of the day. But I do see some of these drug cycles and just think, to me, that means they have not been prepared. Their body is not ready for this, needing that many drugs, and the drugs are expensive on top of the whole process anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
is there a solution for thin linings if women are having thin
yeah,
linings?
yeah. So a thin lining generally indicates that there's low estrogen. So we do a lot of herbal medicines to support endogenous estrogen production. If there are estrogen production issues, like, we don't have any ovaries, as one of the reasons that women may be using donor eggs, then we look at things like vitamin E, again, bringing blood flow to the endometrium, vitamin E, coenzyme Q10, maca, and there's lots of beautiful herbs that will help to thicken that. And we may do that in conjunction with some estrogen, medications as well, which is fine. But I'm trying to support that natural process as much as possible to help to try to reduce the number of drugs that women that need to be taken. Because it's, I know when I was going through it with my own eggs, not so much with the donor eggs, but with my own eggs and the drugs I was on then, I was a bit loopy. Like I was not me at that time. It was not pretty. So you're really focusing on that nutrition. And then the other thing is acupuncture. Acupuncture is, we know that how good it is for IVF, and they talk about so the latest research that was done in 2019 showed that the more sessions of acupuncture that you have, the better the outcome. So it is dose dependent. And they talk about 9 to 12 sessions before you do any IVF, but including donor egg IVF transfer. And that again is for the endometrial lining, blood flow to the uterus, but also for your head, keeping you calm. All of that stress and anxiety, we know that stress and anxiety are the top reasons why implantation or IVF can be challenging at that time. So the acupuncture is incredible for it.
Another question has come through here.
Yep.
Is what advice do you have for premenopausal women who are going through donor IVF?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I'm 50 and my last period was in January. I'll just share everything here. And I still have 6 embryos in Malaysia. So as you said, Sam, I can't bring them into Australia. They're still sitting in Malaysia. We were going to go again before COVID hit. Then we couldn't go. So I have these 6 beautiful embryos sitting over there. And I now have not had a period since January. So I'm sort of going through this process of, okay, if I wanted to do it again, I absolutely can, but I would go on the pill. I would do that to force myself to have a bleed. Yeah. And so that we know when the bleed is, because again, we're not worrying about ovulation. We're not worrying about eggs. We're just worrying about when is the bleed? When is that progesterone kicking in for the endometrial lining? When's the estrogen kicking in? So yes, definitely go on the pill, but also helping to support those estrogen levels. So herbs like black cohosh are great for that. So women going through menopause or are perimenopausal and they still want to do this, you can still do it. Absolutely. We support that estrogen production predominantly. But one of the interesting things with menopause is we tend to think about it as an estrogen issue. Progesterone is actually the first hormone to drop. So we use a lot of Vitex or the herb chase tree for that, and B6 for the progesterone. And then for the estrogen, we're looking at black cohosh, dong quai, red clover, a whole lot of herbs to support that and to still, benefit a cycle. Right. So it can still be done. Yeah. And acupuncture again is brilliant for that.
Yeah, perfect. Right. That's great. Yeah, I forgot to mention the Malaysia program before. It's one of those overseas ones where we are seeing increasing numbers of Australians going there. And you're saying that Malaysia program, they're not all Asian donors then there?
No, so Kathy, who runs the Malaysian fertility choices, choices, yes. So when I was doing it, they were having the Caucasian donors. So initially they used traveling donors, which was the connection that I had with my first donor. The third donor that I had was from Ukraine. They're using central IVF, which used to be Manor and then changed to central. So they were getting their Ukraine eggs, but then they did change, because they were in Malaysia, they did change their focus a little bit and go to go to their Asian donors. So they don't have as many Caucasian donors now, which is, they did, but they're very much Asian focused now, and that's where Kathy works with fertility first in New South Wales.
Sure. We'll time for one more question that's come in. With the acupuncture, when you say 8 to 12 sessions, over what period are we looking at there?
So basically the preconception plan or the preconception programs that I've put together are 12 weeks. So there's 3 phases in 12 weeks. And if you do the acupuncture, one of my programs has 10 sessions, basically one a week. For that sort of 12 weeks. So 9 to 12 sessions, and not forgetting to do the pre and post IVF acupuncture is if you don't do anything else, do the pre and post transfer acupuncture. So within 24 hours before your transfer, and then within 24 hours after your transfer. And we do those as a single cost, because it's, it's our gift to people going through this, to try to keep these prices down. And the packages I've created is trying to really keep the price down for individuals and couples going through this, because I've probably spent 200, in excess of 200.
Yeah, wow.
So
it's amazing.
it certainly does.
I get a lot of couples who just stop counting, because it does keep adding up.
I didn't count for a very long time. I went, I can't do it. Now I've got my 2 children. It's like, okay, let's just see what this cost me. I put everything on hold for it. So
Look, thank you so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
It's great to have you here. If you stay online, that'd be great, because the questions might come in the Q&A. That'd be terrific.
Yep. No worries.
We're now going to switch to our parent panel, and Growing Families has been famous for running these panels for years now. So we're going to get Samantha and Karma to start their videos, and Simone and Tiffany. Hello, Sam. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Let me just find Tiffany here.
Hi.
Coming.
Hi.
All right,
Hello.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, you guys, today. That's really great of you. So we're going to hear, some really different stories tonight. One of you's done double donation. I think, Tiffany, that was you, wasn't it? Eggs and sperm, and we've got a local story from Simone, and USA and South Africa and so forth. Look, obviously this is a really key an emotional issue for a lot of our intending parents, thinking, oh, look, what's it like? Am I going to bond? Is it going to work first, second, third go? Am I going to go broke doing this? Look, Sam, we might start with you. Could you tell us a bit about what brought you to Donor IVF? What had you done in terms of IVF in Australia?
Sure. So I was, my husband and I were married when I was 37. I'd been married previously, but didn't have any children. And we sort of wanted to wait until we were married. We had all these sort of holidays and bits and pieces planned, and we thought we'd go off and have our honeymoon and come back pregnant. Very, very wrong. So we sort of, we were very well aware that we should wait, or we should try on our own for 6 months, no longer than that due to my age. However, I'm quite tight when it comes to spending money, so we kept going a few months more. And then, of course, we had to wait in order to get in front of a specialist. So we ended up seeing Lynn Burmeister here in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. She checked out my husband's sperm, checked out my AMH levels. I was positive that my husband was going to be the problem. But guess what? His sperm was perfect. Lynn went in and she did a hysteroscopy, a laparoscopy, DNC dye work, the whole kit and caboodle, just to make sure that everything was good. And she said to me, look, your AMH levels, they're not ridiculously low. They're okay for your age. I was 38 by this stage, just turned 38. So let's do some rounds of Clomid. So Clomid just stimulating the follicle production, and then I was doing a trigger shot to bring on ovulation, and then a little bit of progesterone support. And we did about 4 or 5 rounds of that because Lynn was adamant that that was really going to work for us. And it didn't. So we decided to go, after about 5 months of doing that, we decided to go into our first round of IVF. Can I just say that I lost count of the number of vials of blood that were taken from me. This is a good thing. This is a specialist that really wants to check everything out and make sure that, that they've dotted every I and crossed every T. So don't be alarmed by that. It means they've got your best interest at heart. So look, as far as, you know, we were I ended up doing 3 full stim cycles. Over those stim cycles, we probably got close to 40 eggs. So I had a lot of eggs. They just were no good. I would get, some, 6 to 8 cell embryos, but nothing was really moving nothing was really going past that. I remember at the beginning of IVF thinking, oh God, how are we going to afford to test all of these embryos, when we get them? How many will we test? Well, we only ever got 1 that made it to blast, and it was no good anyway. So but we did 3 full stim cycles, and at the end of it, I said to Lynn, I can't be destitute and not have a family at the end of this. So what do we do? So that's when she recommended, well, when I say recommended, she had a post-it, and she wrote on the post-it, Cape Fertility, and just sort of popped it across the table, and that was it. My husband went home that night and was Googling and trying to book flights and signed up to all the donor agencies and all the rest. I didn't know that that there was all these other fertility clinics that you could head to around the world. It was just that this was Lynn's recommendation. We sort of held her in high stead with her knowledge on it, so that's what we did. Anyway, I walked out and I hated Lynn. Funnily enough, got in to see another fertility specialist, Karen Pace, here in Melbourne. She looked over all of my bloods and all of my results. I also hated her at the end of the interview. She also, at the end, she told me I needed donor eggs as well. Look, I was 39 and a half, heading towards my 40th birthday. So I just decided that I needed to stop everything, drink, stop taking prednisolone, and just try to get my head around this whole process. I had emailed Cape Fertility in the meantime, just to see what things were all about. But yeah, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
How long did it take for you to be ready? Yeah,
look, so that was sort of July-ish. It wasn't until the February the following year, in 2018, that I thought, this is what I really want to do. Funnily enough, I found a Facebook group, Egg Donor Angels Online, and met Tiffany in the March at my first brunch that we have here in Melbourne. We sort of try to connect that way, and we still do those very successfully. So decided that was it. I had to choose my donor and get things moving. So I did it all on my own. I had a GP that was happy to write scripts for me. At the time, Lynn was happy to provide me scripts for the stuff that the GP couldn't give me. As Miranda was saying earlier, I made sure that I had all of my acupuncture sessions. I did them leading up to the transfer 6 weeks before. They were a time where I just had 45 minutes to sort of lie there and think about how I needed my body to do this for me, and for me to really understand where it was. And I asked so many questions of the acupuncturist. I think it was probably a bit silly, but it was just me really getting my head around the process. My husband and I were going over there with a job to do, and we needed to make it happen. So we booked all of our flights, all of medication, all the bits and pieces, did it on our own. And liaised I didn't even have a Skype with Cape Fertility. It was all done via email. I look back now and think, whoa, how did this all come together?
Do you remember how many embryos you made over there?
Yeah, absolutely. I can even tell you, all the ins and outs of them. But so we chose a 28-year-old donor. In the end, she looked nothing like me. I just felt like she was the right person. Oh my God, there's some of the things I was searching for in them. I wanted a donor that likes to play netball like I did, and all these crazy things. soon that really didn't matter, and it was someone that I just felt a real connection with. So our donor, we collected 16 eggs. From those 16 eggs, we had 12 embryos. Sorry, from the 16, there were 12 eggs that fertilized. And from there, we ended up with 7 very good quality embryos. We transferred 2 fresh, and those 2 fresh embryos are now my boy-girl 3.5-year-old twins.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we have 5 embryos in Cape Town, waiting for us if I can pluck up the courage to be more than a 2-child family and be outnumbered by children. So for us, it worked first go. But we didn't go over there without making sure that we had no autoimmune issues. We had all, you know, my lining was fabulous. Was I in the right headspace? I know that Julia mentioned earlier, was I breathing my own eggs? Was I ready to go? I was kind of somewhere in the middle, a bit like she said. I knew that a very good friend of mine, Karma, Tiffany, ladies also know Natalie. Natalie always says, keep your eye on the prize. And the prize for me was to be a mother, and for my husband and I to have a family. So there was no turning back. Off we went, came back with 2 stowaways on board, and had an unbelievably healthy pregnancy. I was anxious. People weren't allowed to bring baby things into my home until I was at least 20 weeks. Yeah, I barely have any. I tell a lot of donor egg recipients now, take photos of your belly, because it's one thing I didn't do. I was just so anxious and concerned about losing, if not one baby, but both of them.
And did they, because they were twins, did they come very early?
No, so this is the thing too, my body, believe it or not, did everything it was meant to do. I had the kids at 37 plus 3, which 37 weeks is full term for twins. My obstetrician here in Melbourne, we used Dr. Joe Scroy, and he said to me, you've traveled the world to make these babies, let's get them here safely. So from our very first appointment, we decided that we were going to have a cesarean, just to make sure that both babies were born healthy. When I say that, sometimes with twins, you might have one baby vaginally and the other one goes, I'm not moving. And so then you're rushed into surgery to have a cesarean. That can happen. We just didn't want any risks. I was already anxious enough.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now, one thing I did want to say, and look, I am a huge advocate, so I could talk all night, but one thing I did want to say, yes, we travelled in May 2018, but for my husband and I to travel, we did everything ourselves. So we had return flights. We ended up doing 21 nights in Cape Town, and you don't have to be there that long. Car hire, safaris, IVF, fabulous restaurants. We did all of that for 15 grand. Acupuncture, the whole box and dice. So you don't need to spend 30-40 grand to make a beautiful donor egg IVF baby.
That's a great point. Thank you so much. Stay on the line, Simone. Let's go to you. So we're going to turn now to a local story. Simone, what did you go through? Lots of IVF before you stopped?
I did. So, no, I wouldn't actually say a lot. My history of, I have a daughter who is about to turn 6. She was conceived with no medical intervention. We were, however, 2 weeks off starting IVF, and suddenly Christmas Eve, yay, well, the thing they tell you is going to happen, I was pregnant. So I then naively, in about 2018, everyone kept saying it's going to happen naturally again. And I just kept believing that my body was going to kick into gear and it was going to happen. It didn't. You know, we booked in the IVF and it was going to, no, didn't happen. I did a few rounds of IVF. My first round was with Melbourne, and none of them survived. I only got 4 eggs, none survived. We then did.
How old were you then?
I was 38.
Yep.
Around, yeah. We moved on. I felt it was best for me to find a another clinic that was a little bit more open to things like alternative treatment. I've been doing Chinese therapy since I was about 20 myself, that had a more holistic approach. So we did move to Lynn at number one. She was willing to take whatever I said and what I needed, but also she's infamous for being straight down the line. And I think by that stage, I really needed that. I needed someone that was going to tell me as it was. So I moved to her. We did one round she did some investigation first. So we did a laparoscopy, hysteroscopy, D&C. I ended up with natural killer cells. So we did a round through there. I got 8 eggs that turned into 4 embryos that were PGS tested. No luck. None of them were going to be going anywhere.
The testing said they weren't any good.
Yeah, no good. I think the term was they're a bit fried. I didn't know where to be honest with you. I knew nothing of IVF before I started the journey. I didn't know where to go from there. And, I asked, as Sam said, to Lynn, is this it? I knew it wasn't it. I could feel that there was another baby. I could feel it inside me. There was another baby that needed to come. But I had lost faith in my body and in its ability to do the thing that we are designed to do, the thing that I kept being told we were designed to do. And she raised egg donation. And so I went through this process. Excuse me if I get teary. My baby is 10 and a half months. So it is still quite raw for me. I spoke about it. I did mourn that, maybe I wouldn't be having a baby with my own eggs, but probably more than that, I mourned the fact that I honestly did not think anyone that I knew would do that for me. I went down the process of looking at World Egg Bank, cried a lot of tears because there's no way we could have afforded to, in my head, travel overseas or do any of those things. I had I chat with my friends about it, had 2 conversations that ended in a week or so later, my sister and someone else who was a good friend offering their eggs. So I actually had 2 incredible people offering, and this, besides the fact that we actually had some hope and now, that someone would do that for us was just beyond me. But I'm a realist. So I gave them a whole lot of information. I said, before we go any further, you actually need to look at, the process of what IVF can do to your body, our relationship and how that would work. I gave them about a month. I said, just let's, keep the lines of communication open. They did some research. They both came back and said, yep, still doing it. So we actually went back to Lynn, and Lynn tested both of them. One of the girls at this stage was 35 and the other was 37. So I wasn't much older than them. Funnily enough, my sister, who breeds like rabbit, came back with the better results. So we then went into the conversation with Lynn was, well, of course you're going to go with your sister, aren't you? And it wasn't that way for me. I think by that stage I'd actually got my head around the fact that I actually there were things that I didn't care about anymore. The things like my child looking like me and things like by that stage I'd let go of that. Mm-hmm. I knew this baby had to come. I knew it was, and I just had let go of it. So I actually didn't care which one we went ahead with. However, I think it was an incredible journey to be able to share with my sister, and with someone, whether it was my sister or not, someone that I had a really close bond with, that I could be really open with throughout the process. and that she could be open with me if she was, you know, having a tough time during the treatment or feeling frustrated. We're very close and we could talk about that really openly.
Yeah. Was it difficult though saying to your friend, oh, look, I'm going to go with my sister? Was that awkward or?
I think from the get-go, I had that conversation with both girls, and they knew that they were amazing. They were both like, you know, whether you go with me or you go with her, it's the best situation for you. We're happy to do it, but it was never once. And you know, my friend still looks at Zara, our daughter, and she's the best blessing ever. So no, there was no issue at all around that.
Was your sister worried about whether it would work? I mean, letting you down?
Oh, so there was a lot of we're real martyrs. I think we were both feeling like I didn't want to let her down, and give, you know, her have any issues. She didn't want to let me down. She came out of her egg collection, and I think there were 8 eggs collected. And for anyone that's been through egg collection, I think most people cry when they come out of it anyway. And she the first thing she said to me was, "I'm so sorry." I'm like, "What?" This is the woman that was getting 4 before that. 3 of those 8 turned into amazing embryos, and one of those is now my daughter, who was just, you know, this incredible little embryo. So with Rose, we opted to freeze. I think for all of us, that was the best option. We wanted to test. We wanted some breathing time. I wanted the condition. I'm a bit of a control freak. I wanted the conditions. I didn't want to be at work. I'd sort of slowed down my work conditions so it would be as calm and in the right mental place as possible. So we transferred at the start of 2021. Just add a little COVID into the mix to really make life fun. So we were in lockdown, on and off, and right through it. Pregnancy was incredible. I loved being pregnant. It was amazing. I did a lot of it's been really lovely to hear. I did a lot of acupuncture. I come from a long line of people who meditate and connect. So it was a process of me reconnecting with my body, and learning to trust it again and watching it grow. There was a massive fear that we'd get this far and something would happen. I think we got to around 7 months, and we were told Bub had a hole in her heart. So just kept thinking, this, like, please work. So I did a lot of visualization. For me, my visualization was picturing laying on the bed and seeing my baby and just her smiling back at me. And I just kept picturing that. And it is the most incredible thing for that to be able to happen now. And she was born in September 21, the day of the earthquake, an hour after the earthquake. And she's been an absolute blessing since.
Yeah, amazing story. Thank you so much, Simone. Stay in line. We'll come back to you in a minute. Tiffany, I want to talk to you now. You've got an amazing story. Can you tell us a bit about how you got to the USA using your donors there?
Yeah, so mine's very long as well, so I don't want to bore you too much, but I froze eggs when I was 37. I had 33.
Because you didn't have a partner, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
And they all died when they were thawed out. They were frozen incorrectly or something, and they'd taken on water. And when they thawed them out, none of them worked.
Wow.
So then I went through various IVF, probably about 6 or so, 2 different specialists, and then decided that by that time I was about 42, because I thawed out the eggs when I was 41, and then did the 6 or 8 rounds it was. I can't even remember now.
Yep.
And then decided to use donor eggs, and I had a friend who connected me with a friend of hers, and she was 26. We did a round of IVF.
In Australia, you found a donor in Australia, right?
Yeah. And she was 26, didn't want to have children, was really positive and wanted to do it. And she got about, I think she was overstimulated. She got about 30 eggs, and I think there were 2 embryos that we did transfer, but they didn't work because I think they were wrecked in the whole process. So then I decided to go overseas because I thought I can't go through. It wasn't a good experience for her. I felt bad about that, and I thought I just rather not be so involved in the process. And went overseas. I had one round with someone from South Africa, but that was in Cyprus, and those eggs failed as well. So she got about 15.
Wait a second. So the donor was from South Africa, but you did the IVF in Cyprus.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yep.
And that didn't work either. I had other donors. One had a hole in her heart, so by the time we got to the clinic said no. When she was born, not at that time, but because she was born, they said no. I had another one whose boyfriend was in a car accident the night she was both supposed to start. So by that time, I was using an agency in the US, and I just said, look, I didn't care anything about the donor by this stage, as in physical, what school they went to, whether they were, as you said,
Yep.
Sam, netballers or not. And then, so just said, just give me your most fertile, successful donor that you have on your books, and I'll meet her wherever she wants to go. And that's how I ended up in LA. And
can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
We got to this stage too in our process of just saying, just give you someone really fertile. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kept you going through all this fails and all these sort of
I just thought it's just a process. It's just I didn't feel like my body had failed other than the eggs. Like I didn't have it where I had uterine issues or physical health issues, or and I also didn't have a partner, so I didn't have anyone possibly saying anything negative to me about it. I did actually start to tell my brother early on, and he got all negative, and I thought, I'm just not going to tell him. So that was the end of him. I didn't tell him any for the next few rounds. He's like, oh, you're just losing money, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, you know. What
about your parents? Did you let them tell them?
No, not until I was 13 weeks pregnant did I tell them.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Wow. Samantha, what about you? Did you tell family or friends what you were doing?
We did. So all of our family and friends knew that we wanted to start a family straight away, and then when that wasn't working, they knew that we moved into IVF. And then, I mean, these people were people that I really just, and when I say everyone, I would probably say that 90% of the people I know that I used donor eggs, and we went to Cape Town, and yeah, it was. I'm an oversharer. At the best of times. So yeah. So,
Tiffany, coming back to you. So we're now doing donor IVF in the 3rd country.
Yeah.
Now, because we've done Australia, then Cyprus, then USA.
Yeah.
Wow. But you found a good donor company in the USA.
Yeah.
Which had a good range. They found you a really fertile donor IVF clinic in LA, was it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yep.
So
okay.
I used Global Egg Donors, and I think you know Robin, and
yep.
So she lives over there, and I went and stayed with her for a week beforehand, and my donor had actually stayed there the week before that, like in the same room and stuff. So it was sort of really nice, and we've got that mutual connection. And then so I just used a sperm donor agency over there. That was pretty easy. That was a lot easier than egg donors. It's just like a menu, and they ship it over, and it's waiting for the eggs. And yeah, so went over in July 2018, and had boy-girl twins also.
Wow. So you were at that age, how old were you when you carried?
43 and 44.
Yeah, wow. Is it hard at that age carrying twins?
No, it was fine until around week 30. I was still walking to work and back, which is about a a 3 or 4 kilometre walk each way. But then I sort of got, I think I got preeclampsia, and I just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The fluid wasn't draining properly, but and I couldn't really move very well. So it was only towards the very end, and I've always had poor circulation in my legs. So I think it just, they said that having 2 there, it sort of cuts off the circulation a bit. So
yeah,
it was the pregnancy was fine. And yeah, I was like Sam as well. I was, had cesarean at 37 plus 4. Big babies, one was 3.5 kilos, one was 3.05.
Oh my God.
And healthy, and very.
It's a great story. You're in a unique position because you've actually seen the donor IVF system in Australia and Cyprus and the USA.
Yeah.
Did you see much difference in how those different clinics treated the donor?
Yeah, so I found in the US their procedures are more advanced. So it's more like, so there's not the separation between the clinic and the doctor. So the doctor who did my, who took the eggs out of the donor also did the insemination and the embryologist side of it as well. And he's got a success rate. He thinks over 90% for donor eggs, and it was all very sort of mechanical, like, and there sort of was heaps more information about the embryos, and I just felt they had so much more control over what was going on with the embryos in that laboratory than anything in Australia. Here it was like, oh, we don't know, we'll just, we'll give it a go. We think it's about a C grade or a B, or, but there it seemed far more. So I just think that they have more funding. It costs so much more there. They spend so much more money on research and their laboratories, and there's so many laboratories. They've got to be competitive. I just think it's a bit, in that way, it's different than here. It was very expensive, way more expensive than here, or in South Africa, but by that stage I was like, well, I've blown so much money, and I just needed, wanted it to happen, that I didn't.
Yeah.
I sold my apartment to fund it in the end.
Wow, amazing. I mean, do you wish you'd gone to the USA first rather than?
Well, of course, I could say that was easy, but I sort of was obviously hoping not to have to throw the kitchen sink at it financially.
Sure.
Which I sort of did a little bit in the end.
Yeah.
So I guess it was that. It was money. I mean, no one wants to unnecessarily, if they don't have to, lose.
I work with a number of women who are going through this on their own. Are you saying to me, though, that it was a bit easier on your own because you didn't have to deal with the husband sort of nagging you about money and stuff?
Well, it depends obviously on the partner and the relationship. Some people, I'm sure, had completely supportive. I've heard of all different, ranges, but not having to have someone even say negative things to me at all, I think was really good. And I had told a lot of friends, like, I share as well. It's really just my family. I didn't really want to, because it's their relative. It was going to be their relative. Like, they all know the history now, but I didn't want to. I don't know. I didn't want to have to explain to them all the time where I was at. Where if I was upset about something, I could just, sit on my own in my room and get over it myself, and then keep going. Whereas, I think, but if you've got a supportive husband, I'm sure it's far better than being on your own. But if you've got someone who's a little bit negative, or and also because I did it so many times, I'm sure a lot of people would be like, "Oh, just give up. It's not going to happen."
Yeah.
But I sort of just thought, I got nothing else to do. Like,
what about?
And I really wanted to be a mother. That's all, really.
Yeah, totally. What's your plan about telling telling kids about using donors? Have you got a plan about how you're going to approach that?
So I've already told them many times, and I've got books. And then Sam mentioned her friend Natalie has written a book as well, and I've got that book. And I just tell them all the time that I had to get egg and seed from someone else to have them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really understand, but you know, it's the same. They don't have a father. I just say, you know, there's no dad in this family. And they're like, yeah, we know. So,
yeah.
I mean, they're too young now. I think the issues come from what I've read. I have done a lot of research on it because mental health is very important to me. I would hate, you know, I mean, it is going to affect them, obviously, but I have to try and mitigate that as much as I can. So I have done a heap of research, and it's sort of, I think it kicks in identity-wise when they're between sort of the 20s and 30s more than young children. So, you know, and you probably get the odd bad comment in the teens or whatever, but they don't really, from what I've read, and I'm only saying in a majority of cases, I'm sure there are some cases where they're younger, but it's sort of that identity age, late 20s, 30s, that they get affected. So I just have to make sure that they're okay about it all, you know, all the way through, I guess.
No, that's great. And we find that, you know, we tell all the parents these days, tell your kids early, and the ones who do, the kids are totally cool about it.
And can I say, we have regular catch-ups in Melbourne, and a number of mums that have gone all over the world and also within Australia, but we're having a kids catch-up in a few weeks' time too, because our kids all get together. So at this stage, they don't really know the importance of them being together, but for us and them growing up together, perhaps if one day my kids don't feel they can talk to me, you know, they could talk to one of the other kids and discuss that. So that's something that's really big for me.
Yeah. Karma, hello. Thanks for being online. Tell us a bit about your journey. What made you end up in the USA for donor?
So it was a long journey. I did 3 clinics in Melbourne.
3, wow.
Yeah, 8 rounds of IVF own eggs, as well as obviously Chinese medicine, acupuncture throughout the whole thing. Nothing seemed to work, but I really believed that it was going to work, which is why we kept going until finally doctor had sort of said to me, look, donor, and I got offended and was quite upset by it. And then my beautiful therapist, Julia, who's on tonight, was also mentioned it and discussed it with me in a very gentle way. And I left that appointment very angry and very upset because I thought, it's not the picture I saw for me. It's not going to work for me. So
because I think Sam also mentioned earlier being angry with her doctors when they told her this. So that's interesting that things coming out.
Very angry. And I'm usually quite an even keel, pretty happy-go-lucky kind of person. But the real Sicilian fire came out in me, and I just thought, you know, and I started thinking, what about my heritage? My grandmother's genes? Like, this is not supposed to be me. Someone else is going to have, you know, and it got really affected me. And then I started to process it, and I sort of, it's funny how you, like Julia says, you get certain points down the path, and there's different sections that you find yourself. And so as I started to process it, I thought, okay, so you're now facing it. You either don't use a donor, don't have a child. Are you okay with that? Or do you consider it? And so I thought, well, I can't not be a mum. That's worse than losing my genetics, because then I'm just not even having the baby. And so that was kind of, and luckily for me, it came quite quickly. And it was like Sam was saying, the grief and the hope were kind of intertwined. So I just kind of went then like a racehorse and just thought, okay, time's running out. By this stage, I had a natural conception as soon as we got married at 42. Lost it at 9 weeks, obviously was egg quality, and then started IVF. So by this time I was 45 and a half, approaching 46.
So you partnered late, did you? You didn't get together?
Yeah. We met, I was 40.
Yeah.
My husband was like 39 or whatever, and international, he was from Indonesia, and anyway, he moved here, and so that process took a little while. And then we got moving quite quickly, you know, got married, thought the baby came quite quickly. So I thought, oh, I'm one of those kind of like, it's normal, 42, good to go. I've got strong Italian genes, I'm fine. And then wasn't seeing a miscarriage in my story. And even after the miscarriage, thought, no, it's fine. I'll just tweak a few things. Did Chinese, you know, went on down that sort of road and health-wise, and then saw nothing was working. So by the time I was 45 and a half, my cousin had offered, so local donor. And I thought, well, that's amazing. She kind of looks like me. Okay, so this is fine. And then she had a bit of a freak out after the psychology sort of appointments and everything. She then lost it and said, I can't. Pulled out. Then her stepsister offered. She ended up flaking on me as well. And one day I remember walking really angry and just thought, I didn't come this far to come this far. I know that baby's there. And so then all of a sudden, Mum's friend said, oh, you know, a doctor was here from the States who actually was here with you, Sam,
That's
one
right.
of your, from
Dr.
Los
Gadir.
Angeles,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Gadir. And she said, look, you know, just have a chat to him. He's a really lovely guy. And so Mum spoke to him. She's in tears. I then spoke to him. I'm in tears. And next thing I knew, I said, Mum, this is where I'm supposed to go. And we knew it was going to be like ridiculously expensive, but we just knew that's where we were supposed to go. I didn't even bother looking at any other clinics or anything. I just thought it's LA. So we went with him, and first donor looked like me. She didn't have a good success rate, so he said, I would suggest you go with someone else. Went with someone else who didn't look like me but had a genetic match with my husband on the panel that they do the testing. And then the third girl looked nothing like me. I said, just find me a donor who's available for September. I don't care, out of these top 11, just choose whichever. I don't care. She didn't look like me, tall, beautiful, blonde model from I don't know where, and blue eyes and the whole bit. And so I thought, okay, well, my dad's got blue eyes, so that, you know, I can, because at that stage too, I wasn't comfortable until literally this past few weeks coming forward with the truth. And I'm now ready to reveal to everybody that we used a donor. So that kind of has been a bit of a funny transition, but I'm really in a great place with it, thanks to Julia. And so the donor, actually, she was 21, collected 40 eggs, 37 fertilized well. Then we decided to do the testing because we thought we just want to make sure it works. So I think 20 eggs were PGS tested and were brilliant. And then we got 9 like perfect embryos from that. So the US, like Tiffany said, is, I don't know, this is kind of next level. It's like a well-oiled machine. It is, and like she said, all the points that she put forward is exactly what I was going to say. It's, you know, the competitiveness, the financial sort of money they put back into the clinics. It's just, for me personally, I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel my experience with clinics, 2 very top doctors here in Melbourne. There's no comparison. Like, for me, it was just, I'm glad we finally ended up in America. Yes, financially it was a lot, but yeah, we're very happy we chose the States. So we had our first, sorry.
Remember, you had to go over the transfer during the COVID lockdown, didn't you? Yes,
because the first one, so in 2019, we did the like egg collection and everything, and we went over for about 5 weeks to do with sperm and everything. And then I did a transfer. We came home. I assumed it worked and it didn't. So I was like, oh my God, where are we now? Well, 21-year-old, and the sperm checked out really well. And so we then did a whole lot of testing, and some of the tests Dr. Gadir had asked me to do, I had been asking to have done here, which was the ERA biopsy. Anyway, they had always said to me, there's no guarantee that it's a successful biopsy to have. But as it turns out, it was, for us, the game changer, I think. So then we went back, thanks to Sam helping us during COVID in 2020, in July. And we did a transfer August, which was successful. And we were there for 6 months. We stayed for 6 months because we couldn't get home. So we were stuck in LA for 6 months. We kind of loved it. It was expensive, but yeah. So, yeah.
Amazing
Here we
story.
go. Yeah.
We're nearly out of time, but sorry, my voice is going.
That's
Simone,
okay.
there's a question for you that's come through. How do you feel about your sister being genetically linked to your daughter? I mean, with any feelings of anxiety about your daughter thinking of your sister as her mum?
I think I went through that very early days, and I don't in any way now. Like if you saw both of my daughters and you had to choose one that appears donor conceived, it would not be Zara. Zara could not look any more like me. The combination of my sister's genetics, the genetics, and my husband, somehow she looks like me ridiculously. But they've got a very special bond, and you can see that. You can see my sister, just adores her, but she just adores her other niece just as much. She's got a science background, and she's very understanding, and her husband put it this way, I absolutely love this. If you were going to offer someone your kidney, you wouldn't keep ringing that person going, how's your kidney? Is my kidney all right? Like
Yeah.
it's so very early days they adjusted, the perspective to that. And I just think it's beautiful. She's to my sister, she's my daughter, she's her niece. And she just adores her. I went through the process, I think a lot of people did, of probably for me more than anything, is she gonna love me as a mum, or is she ever gonna look at my sister and somehow miraculously identify her as mum? She's mummy's girl through and through. So yeah, it's beautiful.
That's great. That's really nice. Look, I thank you so much for sharing. It's great to hear all your stories and the diversity of them, and it gives a lot of people hope who are on here thinking, will this ever work for me? So those of you who are online, please reach out for support if you need it. We've got an incredible network of people we can refer you to, whether it's doctors or counsellors or naturopaths and so forth. Or just people who've been and walked in your shoes, to hear from. There's a number of events online coming up or face-to-face in the months ahead. As I said, next month there's some webinars on donor and surrogacy stuff in the US and Canada and other countries. So have a look at those if you'd like, if you want more information. Or reach out to us if you need more stuff about what was talked about today and want referrals to any clinics or programs that were mentioned. Great to have you all here. It's good, and we'll send out the recording tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.
That was great.
Thanks,
Love having
Sam.
you. It's really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.